The thing that scares us a little bit is the current financial situation in terms of inflation, construction prices, and it's the planning system and where that's at. It seems to have tumbled down the agenda.
Planning is a big one for me, and I'm sure it'll be raised by a couple of developers today. We have some allocated sites with local authorities that they need to push through, and it's taken at least over a year sometimes to get them through the planning system, which is having a massive impact on housing supply.
The land supply is massively constrained. Greater Manchester house prices have risen by more over the last 5 years than any other city in the UK. And that's a function of the fact that half of the local authorities in Greater Manchester are not delivering enough homes.
The politicians need to get together and just in the North West and just sort the planning system out and the strategy for moving forward and opening up sites, because it's all difficult for us, isn't it? Because we're all looking at the same pieces of land at the moment.
You know, the fact you've done away with the spatial frameworks, the fact the Greater Manchester spatial framework, I think, started its life in 2012. An 8-year, 10-year lifespan to get to a point where we're agreeing where development happened. These are the foundations of how we're going to generate drive growth.
There's 2 or 3 years where we can all crack on and do a good job, and we've all got partnerships and relationships and we can do transactions, but then after that, like you say, where do we go? There's no feeling of strategy.
The government took the view that where house prices are highest is where we should build more new homes, because that is where the demand and the shortfall is, to an approach that Michael Gove seems to be favouring of planning and saying, well, hang on a minute, one way we can try and take heat out of the housing market in London and the South East is to close the gap between London and other cities and towns. So by investing in infrastructure and skills, that will reduce the number of people that are moving from there to London and the South East, and you can support that by building more homes.
People tend to buy houses for 2 reasons: A, access to job opportunities, and B, access to good schools. So you've got to address those things to address the housing imbalance.
I think we've just not got enough detail in terms of what levelling up is. There's been some big statements made, but there's no detail behind it, and as usual it takes a long time to get that detail, but that doesn't help in terms of the land supply and progression of opportunities moving forward. The big concern, I guess, just even in the short term, is the amount of time that it takes to get stuff through planning.
I don't think the councils, the planning departments necessarily understand what delivery is. They understand what a planning permission is, and they're great. They're great teams, but they're just woefully under-resourced. There's a disconnect between delivery and planning consents, and this is what happened in Manchester in the city centre in the last 5 years. Is loads of consents were given, and there's loads of consented sites that are sitting there languishing because there's viabilities gap.
I think it's going to take a big hammer to crack that nut with the planning system, and it's not a quick process, especially if we have a change in government as well.
Short term, it's a supply issue. We're not providing enough land to build enough houses to decrease the value of houses. New houses, that has to be the case.
Price of land over the last 12 months has gone ridiculously high. The number of aggressive bids that are coming through.
The sites that 3 years ago a registered provider wouldn't bid on or develop, and because of grant they've been able to do so and make really competitive offers.
You've got issues with materials, you've got issues with labour, but you're still getting significant house price inflation. So all of those elements at the moment are just getting washed through. There's significant inflation in land values at this moment in time.
Trying to forecast the next 2 years for turnover and being able to tell residential providers what we can provide, where we've got gaps. It is difficult because I can't tell you in 6 months' time I'm going to have planning there, I'm going to be on site 3 months after, but then it's also fixing then costs with subcontractors, which is really hard at the moment because, as we've all pointed out, it changes week by week.
The landowner generally goes through a process of competition to get the very highest price, and then the person who's going to buy the land has to then work out how they're going to fund it.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Thanks to Onward Homes for organising this with Place North West today.